Welcome to the Josh Button Podcast, where we discuss health, wellness, and outliers from society. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Josh Button Podcast. Today is episode 76, I believe. I am joined by Benny Voncken, and you are a Stoicism coach. But to be quite honest, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have absolutely no idea who Stoics are or what Stoicism is. So let's start there. Tell us, who are Stoics? What is Stoicism? And then we'll get into how you came to this path in life.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on. And having like over 70 shows, that's pretty impressive. So congrats on that. That's an impressive feat. And yeah, no, I get that a lot. We offer Stoic coaching, and people ask like, what is that, right? And from the offset, I'm not here to turn people into Stoics. My main goal would like to be to help inspire people to find their own philosophy of life. And for me, that is Stoicism, right? And I think that there's a lot of value in there for people to find a way to live better lives. So, quickly, Stoicism is an ancient philosophy that stems out of Greece, and I happen to be in Athens at the moment, kind of delving into the roots and the histories. And this is where it came from about 2,300 years ago. A guy called Zeno, he grabbed a couple of different philosophies and made it his own. We started with cynicism. He has parts of the academics from Plato and all of that stuff, and he kind of put it into his own stuff. And that's where Stoicism came from. And the name, interestingly enough, comes from a stoa poikile, which is like a covered archway or a porch, if you will, where he just walked up and down and kind of brought philosophy back to the common people like Socrates did, whereas Plato went into an academy and it was more for higher up people, and he just brought it back to the normal people. And that's where Stoicism came from, the name, from the stoa poikile, and he just walked up and down. So it is a practical philosophy, something that should be lived, in a practical sense.
Well, where are you from?
I'm from the Netherlands, so I am from Europe. I like to travel. I've lived abroad for almost 2025 now, for almost 15 years.
That's awesome.
Time goes quick.
I was actually just writing about my first experience in the Netherlands, and I mean, it was a long time ago, but
wow, nice.
Quite a fun place for myself. So when did you go to Greece?
I arrived here like a month ago.
Okay.
Yeah, just about a month ago. It was the first time. I'd never been. A lot of people, and it's interesting that there's a lot of famous Stoic authors here. If people listen to this and they want to delve into Stoicism some more, you have people like Donald Robertson, Massimo Pigliucci, who wrote some really good books to kind of get into it and to learn the ancient texts and see what information you can get out of it. And they happen to be here as well. I didn't know about that, and it was nice to get to meet up with them.
Have you found that a lot of Stoics are authors? Is that almost a prerequisite at this point?
No, it isn't, but it is very difficult to find the Stoics. So, for example, philosophy isn't something that is very popular nowadays, right? And Stoicism has kind of gained in popularity, but I always ask myself, is that the true philosophy, or is that kind of because there's the broicism part, you have it in the masculinity scene a lot, where you're just just suck it up and just keep going and forget about all your emotions and just keep, uh, go through everything without, with that stiff upper lip. And that's kind of the modern day way, if you say, oh, this person is a Stoic, right? But the true philosophy is so much different. And I always kind of compare it to a Western, more pragmatic version of Buddhism.
Right.
That's kind of more where it is at.
So you think that's a misinterpretation in I guess, the social media era and the way people are presenting it?
Most definitely, yeah. It's, when you really look at what Stoicism is and philosophy in general, it's a very difficult sell online. It isn't sexy. It isn't something like, oh, do this and your life will change. No, it's like, do this, and if you do this long enough, then your life will change, right? It's this. So if you go online, people want that instant kind of fix. They want to know oh, you just got to follow these 5 steps or this program and then you'll be there, right? And philosophy asks yourself to really look into who am I? Ask yourself the difficult questions, and do that self-examination, reflection, all of that part. It's just an ongoing process that probably never, when you asked at the beginning, who are the Stoics? I wouldn't really call myself a Stoic, but more someone who is trying to live a Stoic lifestyle and trying to get as far ahead as they can. Even the old authors that said I would love to see Stoic. I haven't seen one in a long time. But whether they're all authors, some of them are, but I think most of them are just trying to, do their best at trying to apply it.
So aspirational. I mean, you hit on something there is like living life with an aim for something better and having something greater. That involves, in my experience, engaging discomfort in a lot of ways. And what it sounds like you're saying is that this is a pathway to discomfort, and that inspection's not always going to be comfortable. So does it take a special kind of person to actually want to put themselves through this and to really engage that?
Well, the Stoics say that this is available for everyone, right? So, and oftentimes this is seen as like a philosophy for just men. But throughout my journey, and we started out with having spaces on X, these live conversations, and just reaching out to people. And I've encountered a lot of women who could identify themselves with this philosophy as well. And that's what the Stoics, they say, the early Stoics, yeah, this is for everyone. And because Stoicism really bases itself on using virtue in your daily actions instead of having emotions guide you in your actions. They say, use that pause and then use virtue and, living in accordance with nature. And we can dive into that a little bit more. But they say that's available for everyone. So that's something that you need to learn and practice and do over time. And that's where it comes this kind of aspirational goal. As you said, they have the sage figure, the perfect person who always applies reason and logic, right? Who's never makes a mistake. And that's obviously this really difficult high standard to reach, but at least that's an aim, right? At least we know the direction where we want to go towards. And then you just have to take those baby steps and, practice that just on your daily and you.
One of my favorite quotes, and I've carried it for a decade plus, is from Frenchman Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And he said, "There is no virtue without struggle." I think he began it with, "There is no happiness without courage." But that's the part that stuck with me the most, is that there is no virtue without struggle. And if we're inspecting our own daily lives and we're avoiding the discomfortable, and we're really engaging processes for comfort all the time, it does give us an existence that ends up being somewhat shallow. So that's one of the things that has drawn me to Stoics and to the some of the quotes that I've seen, and to some of the individuals and the way they present this online, because it does resonate with me. It resonates that, look, if you're not really paying attention to what's going on in your own life and you're not aspiring to be something better, then you're probably falling short in several areas. So
Yeah. And
go ahead.
yeah, good. No, I love that quote by Rousseau, and that really hits to the point as well. Like, and there's so many other quotes by Marcus Aurelius. He says, "The obstacle becomes the way." Seneca says, "You are unfortunate because you have never been unfortunate. You have never had that moment to test yourself and to show who you really are." And that's where funny thing there is like those difficult moments are actually something that you welcome because they are these ultimate learning moments and these moments where you can actually test. And they even say exactly what you said: is if there's no struggles, then why do you need virtue, right? If life is easy, so why do you need it?
And I think we live in a day and age when a lot of people would virtue signal all kinds of things that have absolutely nothing to do with virtue, and just the fact that they're sharing the information the way they're sharing it proves that it's shallow and void. So, what brought you personally to Stoicism?
Yeah, that's when we talk about obstacles and struggles, that's where it began. And a lot of people who go into the philosophical journey, they tend to start there, right? I haven't really come across a lot of people who are like at the top of the hill shouting, "I've made it, now I've got to work on myself and improve," right? That's usually, but maybe that's even the moment where you actually have to go and pay a lot of attention to what you're doing, because you might fall into a lot of the pitfalls that might lead you down the hills. For me, it started with a combination of things. With a divorce, my marriage ended. That's never an easy thing. So it's really good to have a guiding principle to lead you through those difficult moments and to have a little bit of support. Also, dealing with alcoholism and overcoming that. So, that's something that I've struggled with mainly for like the public opinions of others. That was something that I was very prone to acting on, and stoicism and really helped me to look at my own life and say, this is what is best for you. And the opinions of others, they will always have an opinion. Whether you do the best thing as possible, there was always going to be someone who says like, hey, you shouldn't be doing that, right? So they really told me like, stay in your own lane, focus on yourself, and then you will set a good example for others. And I've had some good examples helping me as well. And I've had some physical injuries, but also just overcoming personal obstacles like dealing with criticism. As I said, people pleasing and falling into the traps of relationships with people, maybe taken advantage of and those things. So finding that own confidence and building that up, that's what really the philosophy really helped me. And I kind of came across, I diagnosed myself with an existential crisis at one point, and I was reading this interesting book on introduction to existentialism by a guy called Olson, and he wrote about like existentialism by Sartre, absurdism, Camus. You know, he had all of these kind of comparing these different philosophies, and there were the Stoics, and I just immediately recognized myself in them. I was like, "This is me. This is what I've got to do here." And that just gave me my path in life, to be honest.
Awesome. I know I found personally, once I decided and I committed, I wanted to be a better person. I started taking those steps. I actually faced tougher and more harsh criticism. It was if you were living a lifestyle that was really blending in with society, there's not that much to really criticize you for. And if you're not stepping out of line in those almost cultural norms at this point, well, maybe the pressure you're feeling is nothing as what it should be. And as soon as we start really getting that pressure from the outside and really getting the criticism, maybe that's how we know we're on the right path. I mean, at least that's the way I feel personally.
I couldn't agree more. Like when I stopped drinking, I had so many people telling me, "Oh, you're not fun anymore," you know, no, you, and maybe because they just felt like, "Hey, I might not be doing the right thing here, and this person made the right choices. Now it's all up to me." Right now, it's like it's kind of backfiring around you. But no, if you don't feel that pushback, then you've got to ask yourself, "Am I doing the right thing?" But then again, you know, I also feel because we often talk about people following the herd and everything, and that usually correlates to people living a 9 to 5 life, and oh, you shouldn't be living that. But I think like as long as you've thought about it and as long as you've made a rational choice that the 9 to 5 job is the best thing for me to do because I get to spend a lot of time with my family, with the things that I love to do, and that's perfect for me to facilitate me in those things. As long as you've thought about it rationally, then at that point you're already kind of separating yourself from the herd just by thinking about and being active instead of just doing mindless kind of things in your life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Actually, I think that's one of the issues I faced early on in my 20s and 30s is that I was doing something that was probably for the good of me, but I was never really acknowledging like what life was and whether or not this was really facilitating my best output or the best long life. And once I started really asking those questions, the money I was making wasn't necessarily as important as I thought it was. So I think people come to that conclusion at their own pace in different ways and generally probably brought up by life challenges that we're talking about in the first place. Alcoholism for myself was one of those things that, it was a societal norm. It was a cultural norm. Everybody went to happy hour. Everybody went and had drinks. Everybody drank after work. Everybody drank on the weekends. I never questioned it until I had a reason to question it. So when you started into stoicism and you saw it, what was the trigger point for you when you said, "All right, you know what? I need to make this my purpose. This is something I want to really get into deeply and coach people and pursue."
Yeah, that took a while. I used to work in education, and so coaching is kind of also ingrained in that. You have to make sure that you know your students and facilitate them and make sure that they're comfortable. So I wanted to move away from that, and I did some coaching courses. And then once I made a connection between stoicism and coaching, that where it all made sense to me. But first, it was that journey of really trying to apply it to my own life, right? And as you talk about, the parts in alcoholism, I have 3 sisters. I was always around women, and then I go to college, and suddenly I'm in this group of guys, and I didn't really know how to act. And you've got to be there and maybe go over the top because you want to fit in. And those were the things that I really had to kind of overcome first and find a solid base for me to work on. And I'm still working on a lot of these things, right? It's not like you've made it and it all. No, you struggle with these things daily and you still ask yourself a lot of questions. But I do notice that it gets a lot easier. And for me, the real thing is when I started to see the practical application of this philosophy, and it wasn't just words and people just talking about life. No, they even in there, like we have the text of like mainly the Roman Stoics like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus. And Epictetus was a slave, but he turned into Stoic teacher, and he at one point even says like, forget about the books, just go out and practice this stuff. And he has saying that we get so lost when we are out of the classroom and into the real world. So when I made a connection of these words and wisdoms and to my own life and how I could apply, that's when I really made a shift and I started looking at everything different. I started looking at moments and just, things happening to me as these learning objectives, as these moments. Okay, I can put this to the test now.
Now, when you were going through this initially, did you have any other influences outside of Stoicism that kind of pointed you in that direction as well?
Well, at that time I was working in Dubai, teaching, so that was not very the most inspirational environment, especially not in education wise. But I had a really good friend there who worked with me, and it always seems like things kind of come together. And as I went separated from my ex, he was very into literature and reading, and I wasn't very much into reading. So he started giving me a lot of book tips, and I just started making it into a habit. I went for a read. Like my life at one point in Dubai was like work in the morning, have lunch, and then go for read for a couple of hours, and that was just what I did daily. And used to read science fiction and just for fun, and went into more science stuff, and then went into the philosophy part. And that's really what made me delve into this more. And we had a lot of philosophical conversations, so that really helped. And with one of my sisters I had the same. So just having those people around you and having a good example of people who are making those choices that don't go with the norm but go against it, that's really can. And but I think, as you said, and that's one of the most important parts, everybody needs to be ready for it, right? You could have told me about stoicism 10, 15 years ago or earlier, and I would have just nudged you away. It's like, yeah, this is nothing for me, I don't want to hear anything. But it was just at the right time, the right moment. I found them, I read about them, and I just instantly knew that it clicked. And again, this was me on a paper, and I needed to pursue this.
Was there a decision that you made ahead of that that kind of opened this door for you? Do you remember anything like that?
That was mainly involved with also with alcohol and with separating. So after just recent after the separation, I was playing football or soccer, in Dubai with my team, and we went out. And Dubai is crazy. You can go to like a brunch, you pay a certain amount of money, and just drink whatever you want, right? You just walk to your table, and before you get there, you've already taken 5 shots, watermelon with vodka and whatever. It's insane. It really is. And I remember, and I was staying in a hotel at the time, figuring out where to go. And I remember waking up the next day just feeling, the worst hangover. And as you get older, they get worse, right? And I just felt, the worst. I've looked around my room. It was just all mayhem, chaos. I didn't even know if I had all my stuff. And I looked in the mirror and I was like, listen, this is not going to be my life. This is not going to be who I want to. If I keep doing this, I'm not going to be old. This is just going to go really bad real fast. So one of the upsides of a place in Dubai is that it is not very accessible to get alcohol. It's not very accessible. So it was a little bit easier for me to get into that non-drinking sphere, because I think at the beginning it's important to remove yourself from the moments where you get the triggers. So I just started making a list of things for myself, like no alcohol, get in shape, eat better, get physically fit, because then your mind becomes clearer. And that's when I also was able to focus on reading, focus on myself, take care of myself, and get a goal besides the stoic goal. I had a goal of becoming financially independent. And you know in Dubai you make more money than in other places, but you spend it very fast as well. I know many people who are either in debt or have no money at all when they leave. So I figured that's not going to be me either. So I made a plan, and I lived like a hermit, very disciplined for like a couple of years. And that allowed me to do what I'm doing now, gave me that time and space for me to kind of pursue it and help other people, with this philosophy as a Stoic coach.
I'm hearing so many parallels between my own story and other stories of people that had these things presented to them as they needed them after they made the decision to change, to take the step, put one foot in front of the other, and demand better of themselves, demand better for themselves, and even plan for the future, like you had said. So it's quite understandable for myself. Commend you on your decision up front, and like I'm sure there's many people that are thankful for your journey and what you've provided for them at this point. With that said, how do you work with individuals? How do you find people? Do they seek you out, or do you have a website? Is this social circle type thing?
So it's a little bit of both. And the problem is, because I travel. So one of the goals is to build this kind of digital nomad life. I don't really like the term, but hey, here we are.
Yeah.
I'd like to travel and have that freedom. So working online is a bit more difficult to create a more dense community. But I have, like in the Netherlands, I've met up with some Stoics, and I've taught some Stoic courses there as well. But mainly people find us like online through via stoica.com, the website, and they can book a free consultation. I think one of the main tasks that we have now is, showing people what Stoic coaching is, because first of all, they might think like, oh, I'm going to be a Stoic, but I always try to kind of separate into three parts. First, you get a person who has applied Stoicism in his life, in case, my case, or Brendan, who I work with. So you get someone who is able to observe and to objectively listen to you, and very, carefully listen. So that is a part of the coach. But on the other part, you can, if you want to learn about Stoicism, we're here to teach you, right? We're here to teach you about the philosophy, where to read, save you that time of diving into like from the beginning, but giving you those steps to really start walking after you made a decision. And then if you don't really care about Stoicism, we can, do more of a standard coaching, but give you the Stoic practices as you go along, and see where we can tailor them to what are your needs, where do they apply to your life, and what can really help you in the moment that you need it. And that's like, those are the three kind of things that I like to kind of explain it as.
Do you offer an actionable plan for those that are starting now and are getting ready to, engage this change and are going to work with you? Do you give them steps for their own study ahead of your engagement and ahead of your meetings or your conversations? Do you tell them something they need to read?
They don't necessarily need to read anything for the coaching at the beginning. Like, that's why we do the consultation, the free, the conversation that we have at the beginning, and see where they want to focus on. And based on those goals, we can, depending on how long they can, either 4 or 12 sessions, and then we can build the roadmap based on their goals. And then we can also look at, it's more tailor made, we look at the right Stoic practices, and then we can give the right text, the excerpts that might really help them in those moments. And it is kind of fluid as well. It's all based on like what the person I'm working with needs. But we have those, because we have like kind of modules. If we want, we can put them together as we progress. And I've seen, a lot of people really bad, because there's so many people come with different things, with different obstacles that they're facing, and then it's easier to kind of tailor make it for them than having like a set program.
Awesome. Sounds like something I would have dove into 10 years ago or so. You know what is funny? I would say I randomly and accidentally found Jordan Peterson and his lectures at the right time. And then 12 Rules, it came out at the right time for me to introduce those things, and then just kind of open and expand my view on the horizon on basically YouTube. Going YouTube, thought leader versus thought leader versus thought leader, and collecting these different ideals. And, a lot of them do center around the same thing. You need to have an aim. You need to have a greater purpose, and the willingness to change and to be better. So I feel like that's exactly what you're pointing people to initially as well. So the people that find you are probably have already made that decision and are already focused on somewhat bettering themselves, and that's probably one of their goals, is to be a better person. So when you work with somebody, you said you'd have 4 to 8 sessions or so. What are the results that you expect to see from people when they're working with you over that amount of time?
Yeah, and again, that's kind of, depending on the person you work with, because it's all about like, as a coach, and again, that's one of the big parts of Stoicism, the dichotomy of control, where you have to focus on what's in your control and what isn't. And as a coach, I can listen, I can give you the tips and the tips and exercises, but still you need to practice it. So that's where it kind of comes to the person themselves. But we do not necessarily push, but hold people accountable, right? So if you come back and you haven't done it, okay, shouldn't be surprised with these results if you didn't do the work. And I think that that's also where, for example, like when we talk about self-help, it is really nice to have those steps and read them, but if you haven't made that active choice to actually put them into practice, then they're not really going to be helpful. And that's the same with coaching. So we've had, and this is also we've had people that come to the coaching, and they feel like, hey, this isn't me. That's great, that's fine, but they tried. But we've also had some really good success stories where people have been, now kind of doing a maintenance coaching, where they just like, yeah, I like to kind of have a few sessions, maybe once every 2 months, just kind of catch up, see where I am, keep myself sharp. So, and then you see just how you can change the lives for them who have that aim, and who have been able to put those things into practice, who have given, like, for example, relationships with money, relationships in general, right, with their work, with their general outlook on life. But more importantly, and I think that this is where some of the self-help books kind of miss, is that deeper question of why am I doing this, right? Even with the 12 steps of Jordan Peterson, I think they have value, but they then need to go deeper. And that's where sometimes I feel like they are lacking, and that's where philosophy comes into mind, because that's constant questioning, like, who am I? Why am I doing this? Like, why is this triggering me? Why am I getting upset by this? And that's where the real value lies, because then you can prepare yourself for the next time when it happens. And I've noticed in my personal life, my anxiety levels, my worrying, my overthinking has just dropped so drastically, because I can, I can just let it all slide. It's like, and because I can see what's going to happen, because I've already experienced it more open and aware, that now the next time I say, okay, this is going to happen. I'm going to feel this. Now let's see why, and how can I reduce that feeling?
So, as a coach, how do you deal with the frustration, or do you allow yourself to be frustrated by the interactions that you just know are not going to produce the results you want? So, I'll summarize it with this: I was a dog trainer and a personal trainer, both. I've spent time doing both, and dogs are very easy to train. Owners are not very easy to train. Personal training is very easy to teach somebody exercises, like you said. It's very easy to show them the workouts they need to do, but you can't take the ice cream out of their hand at 11 p.m. when you're not with them. So it can be frustrating on a coach's side. How do you avoid that?
And that's where stoicism comes into play, right? And I used to be one of those trainers. Like, I had a pretty bad one of, not trainers, but one of the trainees, right? I had a pretty bad knee injury, and I went to the physical therapist, and she was like, "Have you done your exercises?" Like, I can lie to you, but I haven't really. I kind of come here to do my exercise. I'm just kind of late because I'm physically lazy, and I try to really keep mind of my food, just try to, maintain my balance of physically. But my mind is just racing these last few years and I'm trying to get the physical part back. I'm just making a lot of excuses here, but but no, anyway, I get what you're saying, right? And training people, especially with dog trainers, you tend to train the people instead of the dogs, right? You train the owners. But for me, this is where stoicism comes into play. So each coaching session is a really great stoic training for me as well. First of all, it is about trying to listen objectively, right? People have their opinions. I don't really care about their opinions. I want to know why, right? I want to know what is behind those opinions. And they might be radically different from what I think about a situation, but that's not in that situation, it's not my place to judge that opinion, but it's trying to find out what's behind it and why is this opinion so important to you and why you stuck to this so much. And then if, once the session is over, I have to let it go. Yes, sometimes it feels frustrating. It's like, you can do this, right? You want, as online, it's difficult, but you want to kind of like, you can do this. But the Stoic practice tells me, like, I can't control it. I can have a little bit of influence by trying to ask the right questions, giving some exercises, but if at the end of the day, if they don't do it, then, that's out of my reach. And that's where my sphere of influence ends. And that's fine. That's also good for me, as long as and this is a really big, important part of Stoicism, as long as I've done my best in the moment that I can, then the rest of it, like there's a story about a Stoic archer, and you can do everything right? So you can train, you can have the best equipment, you can try the best aim, focus, the best breathing. But as soon as you let go and that arrow starts flying, whether it hits the target, that's no longer up to you, right? But you have done everything you had to do. You've done all the best you could until that moment. And then you have to kind of let it go and be satisfied with, like, the fact that you've done what you needed to do.
Okay, so we established the why for the individual that comes in and starts to work with you. We established the why. We start to understand, all right, what's ticking behind this person's conscious and then what's going on in their subconscious that brings them to this point. What role and how heavy of a factor is it in belief? How much do they need to believe that they can have the results that they're actually seeking, and that they can fulfill the why?
Yeah, so, and this is interesting because Stoic philosophy is the foundation of cognitive behavioral therapy. So belief and thoughts are really important in all of this. And that's where it starts, right? And a lot of the, people that I work with, and I've had it myself as well, where you kind of talk yourself down and you say, I can't do this, right? So that's where we've got to start with those beliefs to make sure, hey, you can do that. And one of the things that I like to see and, find with my clients is find those little wins. And that's again, when I found the practicality of the philosophy and see that it could actually help me. For example, one of the things that I read a quote by Marcus Aurelius where he said, that person is bound to act that way. It's like getting angry at a fig tree for secreting juice. And by the way, soon you'll both be dead and soon forgotten, right? I love how he kind of, if anyone hasn't read the Meditations, it's a wonderful book. It's short little excerpts, personal diary, never meant to be published, of the Roman emperor. Anyway, I love that book. But I read that quote and I went back to work the next day, and there was this colleague who was just always getting under my skin, making me feel frustrated. And after I read that quote and I faced him again, it's like, I cannot change this person. If I want to deal with it better, I need to focus on myself. And that was that little win that I needed to see that this was something that I could actually use in life. So that's something that I try to find and then have that belief come into the people and make it just into steps, right? This is a process. We don't need to win, we don't need to have the prize at the end of the day. No, this is a process, a step-by-step thing. And if you mess up at one point, hey, use that as a learning guide for your next moment and you can move from it. So yeah, the belief is really important, and that's something that people need to grow. But I think it's also a part of what you said, like you've had, the people would have need to have made that choice already. Because if you haven't made a choice, it's the same thing when you want to go to rehab. And I was talking to this lovely lady I met when I was dog sitting, like I'm house sitting, cats and dogs, and I was looking after dogs in Mexico, and she had a son who was struggling with substance abuse. She went to the most fancy clinic, and they told her, listen, we can have him come in here, but he's not ready for it. He hasn't accepted it yet. He can come, do the steps, do the process, but then a few weeks after he's out, he's going to be back, because that's the real important things. The good thing is that usually when people come to us, as you said, they've already made a decision, and then it's just for us to kind of keep helping them move forward by little steps, by focusing on the right things that they need to work on, and that makes it really relevant for them in their personal life.
Right. So are you addressing self-limiting beliefs and self-talk and the things that might have been hindering progress with most of your clients?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We look at that, and and that's the good thing about philosophy, where it's those questions like, so why are you asking yourself? What is it behind it, right? Are you trying to kind of go into the what's driving it, and then you see that life around you is like a mirror. So a lot of the things that maybe even like when I find myself criticizing other people, it's like, wait a minute, is that something that I'm thinking, or when I was like, oh, is this real? It's like, what does it tell me about me? And that's what we try to revert back to the people that we work with, and then have those limiting beliefs checked and examined, and give them exercises to work on that as well. Again, that's something that is a habit, right? A limiting belief is a habit that you've ingrained in your mind, and you can break that habit. There's ways to kind of break through that, so it's not impossible to get through it.
So with your personal Instagram, you have a lot of poetry on there, and I know before the show you said that you weren't really doing it as much because of how much time it took up. What was that exercise for you? Was this an outlet? Was this accountability? Was this just artistic outlet, a way to express yourself? What was it? What started it?
So yeah, I kind of and it was also draining because I wanted to kind of make it look nice or like sound nice, but it was mainly my way of journaling and just taking a moment like in the morning and afternoon, like. And this is again a big practice in Stoicism, where they they ask people to journal, again, the reflection more. They have like a kind of structured journaling where like look at two things that did well, one thing that didn't, and then see what you can do better next day, right? But I wasn't really to that task. And I think that most of these practices, and that's what we try to help people as well, to find your own way of doing it that works for you and that you can do consistently. And I've been doing these writing, well, they kind of morphed into poems. So, I don't want to call myself a poet or anything, but people label them as like, oh, wow, great poetry. And it kind of morphed into it. Like if you read my first ones, it wasn't anything like it. And I have my own structure, my own rhythm in my head, at least. But it was just a way of kind of taking 5 to 10 minutes and then just thinking about like, what is my struggling with, what is difficult, what am I facing, or maybe what do I feel good about, and then having that flow. But that usually like finding the right words, and it kind of took up like 20-30 minutes. And then I like to have like I took like an AI mid-journey picture, like I just put my text into the AI and had a like, because I like the visual. But one of the reasons why I chose to do it online is because, and this is the same thing why I started blogging, or one of the reasons why I started blogging, because if I write for myself, it can kind of become this mess. While if I know that I'm writing for maybe a fictitious audience, I don't know how many people read it, right? And I got some really nice feedback on it, but at least then I need to make it more structured. And it helps me personally to put my thoughts in better order, which makes them more sense. And the same thing with the blog writing. I started because after you start with a philosophy like this, your mind just starts to explode, and I needed to get it out. And I started writing for myself, but I just went from left to right, and I, wasn't really paying that much attention. But when I figured like I'm writing for an audience, right, maybe an audience of one or more, that gave me more of a focus on making the thoughts more concise and more structured. And that really helped me personally to internalize the information, but also to just give myself that freedom of like, it's out there and now it's there. I don't have to be afraid that I'm going to forget it.
Right. There's actually several studies that confirm just exactly what you're saying, that we are rewiring our brains when we go about writing, whether it be personal journaling for ourselves or writing for an audience. So awesome. I love the poetry. I love the page. I think people, if you're listening to the show and you're watching the show, go to Benny's Instagram, check it out, because there is a lot there, and I think you start to get a little bit of insight as to the philosophy itself from your writing. And I think it's good for individuals just to go and outsource that thought for a few minutes, take somebody else's opinions and what other people are observing, and just digest that, because it is a nice little escape from our own stress, reality, or whatever issues we are dealing with at the time. And I enjoyed it. So whether you're still writing it or not, thank you very much. I liked it. What's next for you, brother?
Yeah, I don't really, location wise, I have no idea. I'm in Athens now until the 25th of August. I'm going to look after some cats. I like that kind of, adventure as well. And I love animals. So for me, that's a perfect mix of the way I live. No, what's next? Like I was teaching a Stoic week in the Netherlands, which is interesting because I usually speak about this stuff in English. Dutch is my native language, right? But I speak about this in English, and then I had to go do it in Dutch, and it's like my mind was blowing. It was, just because. But what are these things? How does this in Dutch? So I had to kind of figure, relearn my own language, which was fun. But no, we like what's next. I'm gonna, we're building some workshops and we're trying to give some more value and spread that out to the world. I'm thinking about maybe starting something here in a physical location, maybe in Athens. It really inspired me. So that's some of the thoughts that I have. But mainly, we're just looking at the ways to find more people and to share this message of Stoicism as best as we can to help other people live and again, inspire them to find their own philosophy of life, because I think that can make a real big difference in the world.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. So well done. Viastoica.com.
Yeah.
That's your website.
That's the website. Yeah. Yeah.
Viastoica.com.
And there you can find everything. You can find like we have like if you like quotes, we have like a long list of Stoic quotes by Epictetus, by Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, anyone. But also like the virtues. What is Stoicism? We like to really delve deep into it. If you want to look for like some reading recommendations, we have like a beginner's guide. If you can read the ancient texts with some more contemporary and kind of mix them. So there's everything you can find there, and we have the podcast as well, via Stoica podcast. So
And also
you
you
can listen to
and
us.
also your Instagram, which I will put all of this in the show notes. But just if you're listening, if you're watching, do check out each and every one of those resources. There's something to be found on each of them for sure. So
Yeah, definitely. We try our best.
yeah, it's probably getting towards dinner time for you, no?
It is, well, it's, yeah, past. It's like 8:30 now in the evening, but it's trying to get like some kind of fasting going on these days,
Are
so
you
that's good.
are you fasting?
Not officially, but I've tried because of the thing when I travel, and especially when the food is so nice. Yesterday we had a lovely dinner. You just eat so much, and now I'm trying to kind of reduce that a little bit, and also to practice having that hunger feeling again and overcoming that. I think that's a good practice.
Yeah, fasting is a very important part of my life. I just finished a 3-day
Yeah.
fast a week and a half ago, and I'm an intermittent faster almost daily. I mess
Oh,
around here and
nice.
there because of my training schedule, so I'll change it up now and then, but most of the time I'm in that 16 to 8.
The most the most consistent fasting I've done was doing the Ramadan twice. I
Yeah.
don't know if you're familiar with that,
Yep.
where it's like not eating from sunrise to sunset, but also no drinking. So no water,
Yeah.
no drinking at all, no eating.
Dry fast.
I've done that as well.
Yeah, it's good for you. I'm a strong believer.
Nice. I'm gonna make it more of a habit in my life as well.
Well, Benny, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing. Like I said, I'm going to put it in the show notes so everybody can come check out your website. And I'm looking forward to what you publish next. I think there's some writing in your future. I feel it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, let's see. Maybe the words are already there. Just gotta put them on paper.
It'll come, I'm sure.
It'll come. Yeah.
All right, everybody, have a good day. Thank you. Thank you very much, Benny.
Thank you.
All right. So let's see here.